how did you get to a point to where you did the maturation? Was it therapy, or was it just a slow journey for you?
It was my wife telling me she was about to leave.
This is Caesar Walker, the cool, calm, collected one.
And I'm Ronnie Gatrey, the emotional one.
And we are the Tipping Point Podcast, your source for the Black male's perspective.
Tipping Point Podcast.
One of the things I wanted to talk to you guys about, I wanted to talk about emotional intelligence in marriage. As Gatrey looks down.
No, I got my cables tied up.
Oh, emotional intelligence, and specifically, I was reading an article by Gottman, Gottman.com. They kind of do like research on various topics and whatnot. Relationships is a big one that they do, but basically, what the title of this particular article centers around: emotionally intelligent husbands are a key to a lasting marriage. And of course, various definitions of emotional intelligence, but it's the capacity to be aware of, control, and express one's emotions, and to handle interpersonal relationships judiciously and empathetically. So what do you think of when you hear emotional intelligence as it pertains to your role as a husband?
I think of Ronnie Gatrey and I think of nothing else. Was my headshot in this article anywhere?
Let me go and look at it. I didn't see it the first time, but
Okay.
I do a good job of ignoring you. So let me make sure I didn't overlook you. And no. What do you think?
No, man. I think this is crucial. Like, I think when I don't think I've ever put the words emotional intelligence together. What is so funny about that?
I don't know, just
That is pretty funny.
as soon as you said the two together and I thought about you, I'm like, is that an oxymoron?
Yeah, we've gone from emotional ownership to emotional intelligence. No, I mean, to me, like, it means kind of our segue into this. I mean, in terms of a marriage, a man who is emotionally aware of his surroundings, as mostly pertains to his wife and maybe even his children or whoever else is under his roof. And going this ties in really well to the conversation I was having with my homeboy. But when I think of a lack of emotional intelligence, I think of a man who is kind of leading the old school way. Do as I say, not as I do. Lead with an iron fist. I'm not going to be questioned. What I say is right. Fall in line or get out. So that's what comes to mind. And that is the classic. That's the classic lead role for a husband, right? Like that's the sexy approach, right? You don't really, society doesn't really hold up those men who are emotionally intelligent, who listen to their wives, who give their wives the floor to speak, who allow their wives to give input on major decisions. Now, yes, as men, as husbands, ultimately it's going to be on us. But yes, when I think of emotional intelligence, I think of that man who is going to lead effectively, but is also going to be aware of the emotions of those under his roof.
What about you, Black? What do you think about that term?
I guess my definition of that term, I guess it stems from like the business world. Whenever they talk about emotional intelligence, it's like being
EQ. EQ.
I don't know what that is.
Is that the acronym for emotional intelligence? Like not IQ, but EQ?
But emotional quotient?
No.
I don't know.
Go.
Okay. Well, what I think about is like being able to walk in and read a room. So like if you're having a meeting and you can tell if it's tense when you walk in and how you should like carry yourself within like a tense situation. I guess within a relationship, I would think it would like deal with maybe if you're coming from work and your wife is at home or she walks in and you're like, oh, like she had a bad day. Maybe I need to like take care of dinner or handle the kids or something like that, give her some space or something like that. That's why I think about it within a relationship.
Gotcha. This article talked about, and those are good answers and responses. what this article was talking about was it almost kind of tied into what you were mentioning in terms of accepting your wife's or it says partner's influence. And it says for our purposes, yielding to their influence means accepting, understanding, and allowing your partner's perspective, feelings, and needs into your decision-making process as a couple. It means really listening to your partner and forming compromises so that you both feel satisfied. So basically what it means is your emotional intelligence is, you may feel strongly about something. You may be strongly heading in one direction, but at the same time, you want to be considerate of your wife, girlfriend, whoever, to where they feel like you care about their feelings and their perspective. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah.
That's the balance in that. And one of the things, the thing that stood out to me in this particular argument or this article is there was a statement here that jumped out to me, that oftentimes we struggle with doing that, generally speaking, as men. And it brought me back to when I first got married. I didn't really know how to balance that, right? Because my wife would have an idea about something or think and it'll be something I never thought of. And I would feel threatened. I would feel insecure. I would feel, you know what I mean? Because I'm supposed to be the leader. I'm supposed to be, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know how to deal with that. And that would cause issues with us. I don't know if you had those types of experiences.
Yes.
And so and for me, Gatrey, I had this unrealistic expectation and pressure on myself. And I kind of said it earlier, to be the know-it-all and to always have the answer. I looked at her father. He was just this do everything guy. So I was like, all right, I wanted to be a smooth transition to me. I got to do it all too. And I didn't know everything. So when things would happen and come up, I would feel insecure as leader of my own home. Like, man, this girl does she really want to follow me? I don't know what the flip I'm doing. Right. And what this guy is saying is to reject the woman's influence and your wife's influence is what actually leads to problems, as opposed to receiving it, because it's not that you're being showed up as a incompetent leader in your home. You actually see your wife. You actually acknowledge, you may make a different decision at the end, but you're doing it in a way to where she feels heard. Right?
All right.
What are your thoughts about how did you get to a point to where you did the maturation? Was it therapy or was it just a slow journey for you?
It was, to be honest, it was my wife telling me she was about to leave. So I went through a deep depression, and I'm okay talking about this now. When I lost my job, when I got laid off, that took a toll on me. And my oldest son was very small at the time, and the insecurities were insurmountable. And my days consisted of sitting in a dark room at a computer, applying for jobs incessantly, getting rejected for jobs incessantly. But what I did not realize while I was in this was I'd never really taken inventory of what I've been putting my wife through. Now that I don't have the distraction of going to work at this period of time, those issues were brought to the forefront. And it was at a point to where I could remember this vividly, my wife telling me, well, why even do this if I don't even have a voice? This is all about you. This whole union we have is about you.
Mm-hmm.
And it was my wife trying to give me sound advice about how to deal with all the pressures that I put on myself during my period of unemployment. She was trying to help. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
But you don't know what you're talking about. You never gone through this. Get out of my face. Right? And I say that for a fact. Even as bullheaded as I was never that disrespectful to my wife.
You're like, I'm the man.
Yeah. So it took me being at that lowest point for me to really hear and focus in on her saying this, because this had been a repeated message for years. And why this woman decided to have a kid with me, I don't know. Because I gave her every reason to leave, like for real. But it was something about that period of time of my lowest, well, I wouldn't say my lowest, but one of my lowest points. Hearing her say that, I don't know if I just had the time or the emotional availability to absorb it. But when she made it very clear that this could probably dissolve very soon and she could walk, then I knew, yeah, okay, I've got to make a change. So it's funny. A very close friend of mine who I want to name on this, but I won't. We talked about him a little bit before the podcast. He had been on me about, talking to somebody. And I remember reaching out to him after my wife and I had this huge disagreement. And then it was just like, okay, well, maybe there is something wrong with me. Maybe I do need to go air out some grievances with somebody who can help me sort through this. So getting back to your question, I think I don't know if I've answered it. I think I'm getting there. But for me, overcoming that was getting to the point to where I almost lost it all.
Wow. Before I get to me, part of this article says in a long-term study of 130 newlywed couples, we discovered that men who allow their wives to influence them have happier marriages and are less likely to divorce. Sounds about accurate.
Oh yeah, 100%.
My wife and I talked about this, and I think it may have been the same trip on our anniversary, because we talked for like 3 hours just about us.
Yeah.
And I had her laughing, just because, of course, we can laugh about it now. But it wasn't funny early in the marriage because I know I was frustrating her. And I was just being bullheaded at times. And she couldn't make sense of it. My wife is kind of she's different in that she's very logical. And I think that's why because I'm, two logical people. So it was really driving her like up a wall earlier in our marriage. Like, why won't he reach out for help? Why, when I suggest something, he gets quiet?
Were you like that while y'all were dating, or did it change when you get married?
It changed once we started getting married because we were handling business together.
Oh, okay.
And so a lot of the conversations that we were having really begin to expose things that dating in and of itself, because you got to remember,
superficial at that point.
Yeah. And we were like, we dated from a biblical Christian standpoint. So we went all in each other's business. We went all, you know what I mean? We didn't get that close of a look into each other's lives like that, if that makes sense.
I want to revisit that once you're done with this.
Okay.
I want you to come back to that, because I've got some things I want to share about that I want to compare thoughts with you.
Okay.
But I want you to finish this first.
So
why does Black look so confused?
He looks that way throughout the podcast, especially when you're talking.
How long has he been over?
So for me, Gatrey, with the help of just, my faith, talking to men, and getting an understanding of who I was as a man. And I think every man needs to know who you are and what you're about.
Please say that one more time for the people in the back.
Like, seriously, bro, it's especially true when you get married. Yeah. You have to know who is Caesar Walker, who is Ronnie Gatrey, what are your values, what do you stand for, right? What are things that you refuse to move off of? What are your guiding principles? We talked about that with Stephen Michael, right?
Right.
who are you? And so when you know who you are, you become a lot more secure in what you do and don't know, number one. So once I got comfortable with who I was, it was easy for me to say to her, yeah, that's a good idea. You know, you're really smart when it comes to that. Da 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 da. I got to keep you around. You know what I mean? Like I can, now I don't feel threatened. I can even joke about it. But I also got an understanding biblically that my wife is a helper, right? She's referred to as a helpmeet. Well, the root word of helpmeet is help. So her influence is how she helps me. It's not to one up me. It's not to show me up. It's, and this is things I had to learn, Gat. Like, oh, she's on my team. We're not competing. So the analogy I give is we're in the NBA playoffs right now. And let's just use the Warriors, for example. The Warriors, whose team is the Warriors? Who's the man of that team? Curry. But if Clay scores the most points in a game, or Jordan Poole scores the most points in a game, should Steph feel threatened?
No.
Right? But he's the man, right? That's his team, right? He should be the one. But even though he probably does lead the team in scoring at times, even average points a game, he's not questioning his ability to lead that team just because he wasn't the leading scorer or the second leading scorer. There's going to be some situations my wife's going to have more points than I will. But I'm still the captain of the team. We're still winning, right? We needed her I needed my wife's input. That's the only way we were going to win that game, right? And so that's my teammate. Once I got that understanding that this girl is really for me, she's not, I don't have to compete with her. I don't have to feel like I'm shrinking just because she's shining. Mm-hmm. Once I learned that, I was able to be comfortable. Now the pressure is off because she knows that I'm not trying to suppress her. And I understand that she wants me to look good. So the advice she's giving me is for both of us to win. Not just her win and me look bad. She's not trying to emasculate me. And so once I got that dude, I stopped tripping. And if I needed to learn that, I took time to learn it. You know what I mean? My wife likes to do stuff around the house, and I used to feel like I needed to do it. Well, maybe she likes to paint. She likes to do stuff like that. And I'm like, I'm thinking that's a man's job. But at the end of the day, I was like, I could care less about painting. You can paint, dear, if you want to. Right. You know what I mean? So it's a lot of things else I do around this house that you don't do. Right. Yeah. So once I got comfortable with me, I stopped tripping on that stuff. And when she gave input or she saw a blind spot in me, I would think about it. I would say, you know what? Let me think about that. I appreciate you coming to me. I appreciate you sharing this with me. Let me think about that. Let me pray about it. I'll get back to you. And I would sit with it. I didn't react immediately. I didn't feel, and see, that's where the emotional intelligence comes into play, because usually we are quick to react and respond. And this article talks about, moments of anger, how you deal with complaints, criticism, the whole nine. Immediately we feel threatened and attacked and we start lashing out, or we just shut down as men. And I learned how to really receive that from her, because again, we have a way of doing that. She's not trying to emasculate or embarrass me. She's coming to me with a legit concern. And so knowing that she's for me and not against me, it's easier to receive that. But you said you wanted to compare something.
Yeah. And thinking of the origins of you as a husband, right? I know one of the things that was hard for me to deal with was, I know that I treated my wife way better when we were courting. And something flipped with me, and I developed this mentality or thought of how our marriage was going to go, I changed to a different person.
Yeah.
Not the same person my wife fell in love with.
Yeah.
And one of the things, and unfortunately I can't go really honest and really open and vulnerable about this, but one of the things that I had to realize about myself was that came from somewhere. Like I had that pictured in my head and somebody influenced that decision, and I felt so influenced by it that I said, oh yeah, once we get off this honeymoon, this is how things are going to be.
You know, we often talk about how women have an image of how their wedding day will be.
Here you go. Come on.
Subconsciously, I think men have an image of how their marriage would be from a standpoint of how they picture themselves as a husband.
Yes.
And when it's game time and the lights are on, and just like we talked about earlier, there's a disconnect between what you thought you was going to be and where you currently are, you panic.
Yes.
You don't want to show her you panicking, but you are tripping inside. You're freaking out.
If you're me, she can see it. Even though you're telling yourself that she can't.
So we expect day one as husbands. I don't even know where we get this from, but we expect day one, I am going to crush this husband thing. She is going to want to feed me grapes. It's going to be so great. But she's asking me questions and I don't know. I just said I do.
Right.
Like, what do you mean? What do you mean? I don't know. I can't tell her that.
Right.
Because I just made a promise to her father I was going to take care of her, and don't call your father.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's just like, I will figure it out, but I got this woman over here looking at me, and that's the difference in dating, depending on how you dated. I didn't have that pressure. And a lot of the pressure, Gatrey, I put on myself. When you think back on it, it was us who did that to ourselves.
I know I put a lot of pressure, unnecessary pressure on myself.
And
100%.
It's not that deep.
No.
It's really not that deep because, again, this is, if you built a solid connection with this woman, this should be your friend. Mm. And there's a place of vulnerability when you can say to her, look, I don't have a clue what I'm doing, but I'm determined to figure it out, and I'm going to give it my best shot. I just want you to be patient with a brother. I'm doing my best. I'm open to ideas. I'm open to your input, but I want you to trust me.
Yeah.
I don't know. So if you ask me, I'm gonna look you dead in your face and say, I don't know, but I'm gonna figure it out. We can figure it out.
Right.
You know what I mean? It doesn't have to just be me. We can figure it out.
And you know, it goes back to, and this is something. I don't know where to start the process with my boys, but that rearview mentality, which I know is not the best, but I'm just thinking, man, if I had a greater sense of self and a clear self-identity going into marriage, my wife wouldn't have to go through what she went through.
I mean, yeah,
you know what I mean?
If we can go back in a time machine and fix a lot of stuff, right?
Right. But that's a major one. And you think we grew up in a different era where self-awareness, I don't know, was if it was promoted that heavily,
right?
But now here we are. We've seen the fruits of self-awareness. We know that, hey, if I had taken these steps to do this before, who knows how things would have turned out. So now we have a responsibility to make sure that those behind us are getting closer to the self-awareness before they enter into these covenants with women. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think about it with my boys, and I try to promote to them now, even at a young age, there are standards you're going to have to do while you're living in this house. Yeah. But outside of that, no. If this is who you are, let's lean into that. Let's be proud of that.
Yeah.
And let's promote that, just so you're, not just a better person, but you are a better husband to that wife that you'll have one day.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I agree. So, I don't know. This is just something I wanted to talk, because
I'm glad you brought that here.
he talked about sometimes these things lead to it leads to unnecessary arguments when we struggle with a woman's influence, right? And so I think, you know, if you and we're talking in a lot of ifs. I'm using a lot of ifs. You know, if you have a good woman, you know, not all a woman's influence is the best, right? And I think that's where it gets back to you knowing who you are and what you're about. I think about Abraham and Sarah, how Sarah encouraged him to have a baby with another woman, right? That turned out to not be a good decision. I think of Jezebel, right? I think of, you know what I mean? Not all influence is good, but I think if her influence and her suggestions lead you away from your guiding principles and your values as a man, that's when you know you can't, I don't know about that one, right?
Right.
And you should already know that I don't know if you if you leading me in that direction. But a woman who is for you, who's on your team, on your program, oftentimes her influence is going to put you in remembrance of the things you stand for. So oftentimes we tend to forget as men, you know what, you right. That's not me. That's not what I'm about. You're absolutely right. You know, I don't know what got into me there. Right. So oftentimes a good woman will actually reaffirm the things that you stand for. And that's how you know you got a good one. And so I think that you just got to trust and be discerning, because at the end of the day, you still got to pull the trigger, because you're the leader, you're the head. But just like a good CEO, just like a good captain, they know to defer. They know how to use the smartest ones on their team.
Right.
And hopefully you got a smart one in your wife.
Yeah.
So yeah, man. Good convo.
That's good. That you've been on it with these articles, Walker. I got to give it to you.
Thank you, sir.
Good stuff.
Thank you, sir.
Keep Your Point Podcast.